Thanks ever so much, Babita, there for that stellar introduction, and I'm glad to say that it's a pleasure to be here to moderate this forum today alongside so many accomplished people within the cable media space, but also to host a panel of so many accomplished women executives that work within this industry. Whether you're on the content side of the cable industry like myself, or whether indeed you're running one of the big providers, or just a viewer who consumes cable products, obviously we're all stakeholders in this industry, and we're painfully aware of the fact that this is an unprecedented time of change, innovation, and opportunity for all of us this year. So without further ado, let's get into our panel discussion, A View from the Top, and I'd like to start out by talking about the changing landscape within this industry. My first question goes to Dana Strong. There are so many changing aspects of what we're doing today, so many ways in which the average viewer of television and consumer of cable products digests what we produce every day. What's the main game changer, do you think, we're going to see in the next 5 years?
Well, I think there, to take your point, there has been an enormous amount of change in the industry, and I think that really where cable's strength has been is in changing the nature of broadband. So really that's been our hero product in the last couple of years. And I mean, an extraordinary growth based off of the investment that we've all made in our cable networks to deliver the broadband service. And so from that point, there raises a number of questions about where to next. And I think there are a couple of game changers that are ahead of us. Obviously, at Liberty, we have invested a lot into the Horizon product. And so we really view that as an opportunity, as a game changer to really start to integrate the different avenues from which you can receive content into one home gateway with numerous devices that hang off of it. And so from our perspective, that's been a very important protection, I guess you would say, investment to ensure that no matter where customers are getting their content from, it's still through the UPC or the Horizon gateway into the home and the environment. And I think that one of the things that cable has always been very good at is the curation of that content and the delivering the simplicity of the experience. And if we continue on that path, no matter what the product name is or how you aggregate that, but you continue on the path of simplicity of customer experience, I think we're going to be really at the forefront of these evolutionary changes.
Now, that's quite interesting, and I'd also like to point out for our audience here today that we have a great cross-section of people who work within the cable industry, from people who provide content, like myself, to also former regulators like Annet, people from the pay TV space, and also, obviously, Berit, whose background is in telecommunications. Let me come to you, Annet, and just follow on from Dana's point there. There's a lot of content being produced today. Are people actually managing to digest all of it?
I think the issue is that we are in the transition from the linear to the non-linear. And of course, there's a lot of talking about the non-linear. If you look at the real numbers, it's going much slower than we think. On the one hand, on the other hand, what we see, we are in an industry of tipping points. We see big companies, if you go to mobile operators like Nokia, BlackBerry, who disappear from one day to the other. We see, who would have said 5 years ago that we as a cable company would be ahead of the telcos in many fronts. So we are in a world which is changing really quickly. And also, if you look on the content side, we did some research at INSEAD at content producers, and actually the big content producers are now really starting to focus to produce content which is original online content, which is slightly different from television content, and they're allocating big budget to that. So we see this enormous increase in supply of content and different content, and then the question is, who will be the best moderator of that content? And this is a big struggle going on. Google is trying to do it. The TVs of this world are going to do it. Cable companies are still way behind in the way they guide their viewers. So I think those who have the best interface and the best access to content will capture a large share of the market, and the jury is still out.
Berit, if I can come to you, obviously with a background in the telco space, obviously pay TV and telco now seem to be sort of very, very, very promising business model, if you like. What have you learned from being in this sector and bringing your telecommunications background into it?
I think, for a fixed incumbent operator, for a fixed incumbent telco, I think a cable TV operator actually is what we dream about regarding a future network, because it has many TV customers, you know, competence about TV. It has high-speed capacity internet for the customers. And in terms looking, if you compare it to a traditional telco, you know, we have copper lines that is, it's a problem to invest to keep up with the demand from the customers. Plain old telephony service, the customers are choosing that way. So I think, you know, the cable TV is actually what we are dreaming about because of the position regarding the future.
Rosalia, if I may come to you, obviously that's part of the big landscape out here, isn't it? It's the fact that cable companies provide so much more, not just in terms of content, but also in terms of services, broadband, mobile. That must present its challenges, also from a price perspective as well.
Yes, of course. I think that the real challenge at the end in any company, and of course for us too, is to prioritize. I mean, our industry is very intensive in capital. We live in difficult times, but we have to preserve this capacity to invest. And in order to do that, I think that you have to, of course, rely on technology. That's very important. But also, I think it's very, very important also you have to talk with customers. I mean, I think that the real challenge of the telco industry for many years has been to get closer to the customer and talk to them, keep a close relationship so that we better prioritize and anticipate the needs of the customers. And for instance, I think that now the real challenge we have is that customers want to have access everywhere. They want to have access to the products, to the services, to the content everywhere. Here, in the street, in the park, or at home. It doesn't matter. And the people are getting used to have this access with higher quality. So they are even getting impatient when they don't get it, okay? And we have, I think, a very, very real challenge in front of us because behind this ubiquitous facility is a lot of money, okay? So we need to invest a lot of money in networks, and I think this is, prioritizing this is a very big challenge for all of us.
Now, I'm sure you're going to hate me mentioning this, but obviously as a Spanish company, the economic horizon isn't particularly clear for Spain, and it must be difficult having to commit so much money to investments, obviously, when the economic backdrop isn't as promising as it was maybe 4 years ago.
Yes, that's true. I just want to say, first of all, that Spain has a big crisis. We don't, no, okay? So we don't have a crisis. But we have to live in that world, and the world is becoming more challenging. So I think that we are in an environment, for instance, in Spain, where prices go down. We are deflationary industry, and that's very helpful for the country. But of course, productivity, we have to work a lot in productivity. And again, we have to keep investing. We are a very innovative company, and I think this is one of our strong assets, and we plan to continue doing so. So yes, the market is becoming more complex, but we are very confident that with the technology we have and with the team we have, people is key, I believe. It's always key, but in difficult times it's even more important. We will continue doing very well.
That's an interesting perspective, obviously, from a country like Spain, where a quarter of the workforce is unemployed. Miranda, I'd like to come to you, because obviously part of investment is also partnering up on acquisitions, and obviously that's what Liberty Global is famous for here in the UK with the acquisition of Virgin Media. We just heard Ed Vaizey mentioning that before. Is that the secret to success? Partnerships, mergers, and also the infrastructure investment that's needed as well for the future of this industry?
Well, I think I speak for everybody at Liberty Global to say how absolutely thrilled we are with our agreement to acquire Virgin Media. From a personal point of view, I'm particularly delighted because I'm afraid I'm old enough to have written the original cable franchise applications that formed the basis of Virgin Media 25 years ago. So it's wonderful to be coming back into this market and to be talking of acquiring a company that is now so confident and in such a good position to compete. Liberty Global over the years has been the most marvelous platform from which to look at investment opportunities right across the world, in every market, in distribution, in content, at the leading edge of technology, and in an extraordinarily wide range of regulatory environments. The analogy I like to use is that working in the modern 21st century cable industry is like playing advanced three-dimensional chess, in that you have to look at every aspect of the value chain. You have to understand it and preferably be ahead of the game. You're dealing with competition across a most extraordinarily wide range of sectors, established telecommunication companies, brand new over-the-top providers, broadcasters. And throughout all of that, having got through, I think for most of us now, the heavy lifting of building core networks, although there's still continuing investment in that field, we now really focus on both how we improve consumer service, how we improve the consumer interface, and actually, last but definitely not least, how we continue to reinvent the strength of our organization and adapt the skills of our people to drive success of the company. I think it's a fascinating time to be in the industry, and it just gets better.
From a competition point of view as well, though, do we need regulatory reassessment of this changing landscape as well, would you say, Miranda?
I think if you talk to any regulator, you'll find that they are in a constant process of reassessment. The dilemma is, of course, that regulation is always slightly behind the curve as technology develops, as consumer behavior evolves, as we look at lessons to be learned from different parts of the world where the competitive challenges are addressed very differently in different political and social contexts.
Dana, I'd just like to go back to the topic of job creation that Rosalia was mentioning before, job creation, the economic role of cable providers out there. We heard Ed Vasey just talking about how important the cable industry is for the UK here. How important is it, especially in Ireland where you are?
First of all, may I say that it's lovely to be on a panel where Ireland wasn't the poster child for the economic crisis. So we must really be getting the brand name out there about economic recovery. But, you know, Ireland obviously has had its extraordinary troubles. And what has been wonderful about being CEO of a cable organization is there is profound evidence about the economic contribution that broadband and the digital economy can create in the economic renewal of a country. And I think, you know, a few key statistics on that would be an example that in Ireland, the GDP, 3% of the GDP is attributable to the digital economy. Minister Vasey said in the UK it was 8%, and UK is kind of the model, frankly, of where to get to in regards to your digital economy. But interestingly, in Ireland, that's set to double to 6% by only 2016. And also interestingly, McKinsey did a report of the G8 countries and found that although the GDP was typically about 4% of economic contribution from the digital economy, over 20% of economic growth was due to the digital economy. 20% of GDP growth actually came from the digital economy. And 75% of the benefits of that growth went to organizations that weren't in the digital economy but were peripheral. And so the degree of economic benefit, frankly, that the broadband investment brings to a country is almost unquantifiable. I mean, in Ireland, we've had 54 billion euros of foreign direct investment, and a lot of that is enabled by having robust infrastructure. If you don't have robust infrastructure, they won't locate there. There's 18,000 jobs.
So much to put in that robust infrastructure. That's the issue.
It does. So the telecommunications and cable industry in full employs 18,000 people in Ireland, contributes 2% of the taxation dollars generated. It's an enormous heavyweight in terms of driving economic recovery.
Annette, I just want to put these 2 points together because obviously you have a background in the regulatory space as well. Does the EU as a whole, is there something that we could do from a regulatory point of view to recognise the economic contribution that cable providers actually make to level the playing field, if you like, for everybody?
I think the whole taking a step back and looking at it. You know, the fundamental question, if you look, 10 years ahead, we're moving probably that in every country there will be 2 infrastructures competing with each other. And both will have mobile and fixed combined. And then from a regulatory perspective, regulators can always be very nervous if there's just 2 because they, suspect collision and all those kind of things. So how are you going to make sure, A, that you have the 2 infrastructures in high quality in the, across Europe? And B, how are you then going to make sure that you have the right balance between, continuous investment and good prices and services for the consumers? And that's a dilemma no one has really solved yet. So first of all, how to make the transition and how then to manage it. And so my feeling is that a lot of thinking still has to be done. A big issue at the moment is this whole discussion, who's going to pay for it? We all talk, more data, more, it's better. But no one's really thought through, what are people going to do with all these megabits? We talked about Japan before, 160 megabits, and people just don't use it. We don't see, we need more energy, and people need to use more energy, and then economy, no, we don't say that either. So this whole thinking about quantities, who's going to pay for it? If you're going to pay, you realize, what is the additional cost if you use more megabits? All those things haven't been solved yet. So regulators should, rather than micro-regulate, start thinking much more about big issues and the end pictures and work their way back from there.
Of course, because the figures required for investment are so significant. Berit, is that something that you found difficult or easy to deal with in terms of sort of the investment, rolling out the services and getting the regulatory response that heads of companies like you would like to see out there for future planning?
What I think is very interesting is that a cable TV operator is actually standing in front of all the challenges that telco has, even if it has a little advantage because it's providing, both television services and internet high capacity in a very good way. If we look at what's going to happen in industry, more of the over-the-top players, they are coming in all different markets. They are born global, but they are coming, very often from the United States. And they are, coming up with very good services. So for the first time, I think our customers are really getting up good alternatives. So they can actually, find out if they are going to cut the cable TV cable or the fiber cable, or not the fiber, but the copper cable, and just have the internet, not the television. And in terms of that, there are going to be such a huge demand for bandwidth going further. The traffic increase in our network is more than 50% every year. And, the revenue is not growing at the same pace. And you need to build very scalable, good networks. You need to fiber up more towards the customers. You need to segment more. You need to use DOCSIS 3.1. So it requires a lot of investment. And what I think is actually required by the regulator is to think more. They have to think about that it's not only a national problem. It's because the big players coming in are born global from the United States. So how should they cope with the regulation? They have to put up a regulatory regime that is predictable. And that's actually pointing to that the operators need incentives to invest a lot going forward. So we should not be put in a situation where everything we are providing to the customers are commoditized. This is not a good thing or a situation to be in. We should put up new services and be able to invest a lot to keep up with the demand from the customer going forward. I've been able to fight back from the OTT players and more regard them as players we can cooperate with.
Annet, I see you.
Yeah, I think the big thing, you kind of take it as a given that the consumers will use more and more and more, and we will just cater to them. And I think it's also important to put a price tag to using this. And if you can you get the same service at a much more efficient way because you use the television and you don't do it through IP, the consumer should be made aware of that because it's just a waste of resources to do it all the other way. So it's both. It's not just enabling, us building these huge pipes. It's also kind of making people conscious about what it is you use and what the costs are you using, of what it is
Miranda,
you're using.
Yeah, I know, but right now there is an imbalance, I think, between the over-the-top players and the telcos.
No, that's true.
Because we don't have, we haven't found, it's the same for the cable TV operators. When I talk telco, I also talk about cable TV operators because I regard them, you know, more as a modern telco, the cable TV on the fixed side. We haven't found good enough business models together. You know, they want to go to the end user providing good services, you know, Netflix, HBO, and they are pushing so much traffic into the telco networks. And we haven't found a good way to deal with it, to actually deliver quality of service content to the customer and being able to share good business models.
Well, this is quite interesting because this is where I wanted to come with Miranda as well. Again, just going back to the Liberty Global, Virgin Media example, one of the interesting things about Virgin Media is that obviously it already has embraced these kind of changes in the industry by offering YouTube on its platforms, etc. Is that the successful model forward as well, to embrace alternative platforms on cable providers?
I think our view would be that there are different dimensions to success, and everyone's spoken about the enormous scale of investment, and that's something that, you know, we're very aware of, and we continue to plan a very aggressive program of investment. In order to address some of the competitive challenges, be it they from established telcos and broadcasters, or indeed over-the-top providers, you know, we have to have partnership relationships that are very strong with providers and technology suppliers. We also, to some extent, have to work in partnership with regulators. We have to help regulators understand the direction in which the industry is going. We would argue very strongly that scale is crucial if we are to be effective competitors. And that scale allows us to make the investment, for example, in the Horizon platform that I know some of my colleagues will be speaking about in more detail later on, which effectively establish the concept of the set-top box as a single gateway into the home through which all forms of content, the ones that we currently recognize, be they YouTube or Netflix or type services or the more traditional services, as well as the services that we can't yet anticipate, will be delivered through a single point of contact to all devices through a simple and readily accessible user interface. So it's a constantly evolving situation, and what we are trying to do is to establish infrastructure and user interfaces that effectively future-proof us so that we can provide all available services that our customers require at an effective price. But scale and continuing investment are essential prerequisites for that, in our view.
The other thing that is pertinent to the topic of scale and regulation is also price as well here, and this is where I come to you, Rosalia. Obviously, to stress the point, Spain is in an economic crisis, as we know. That must be affecting your customers. How does one get the price right when a customer is demanding so much content and so many different products?
Well, as I said, in Spain, the telco industry is a deflationary industry. So we are living in a society, in a market where prices in general are going down. And customers became very, very price sensitive. I mean, they look at prices much more carefully than before on any category, okay? Of course, also in telecommunications. Now, in order to do well in this kind of environment, what you need to do is, again, to do better than others. So to deliver better services, to deliver better products. And if you are able to deliver unique products, as we are, and you are the only operator really delivering broad-scale high speed, or you are the only operator that delivers a highly advanced television platform like the one we have with TiVo, and very much in line with products like the Horizon product we were talking about, with a very powerful access to all kind of content, then customers will, of course, not all of them will be convinced by your product, but you will be getting new customers and selling a lot of services. So what you have to do, again, is you have to be You have to work harder to convince customers, but the basis and the dynamics are very similar. You just have to do better. You just have to launch new products. You just have to have a very high pace of launching innovative services and convince customers that you are the right operator.
So what would be your first innovative service that you think really makes a difference for a company like Annet?
Very clearly for us, high-speed broadband made a very big difference. We launched high-speed broadband already 2.5 years ago, and we were the only broad-scale operator with high-speed broadband. And now this is what ONO stands for. I mean, ONO in Spain, first of all, means high-speed broadband. And because customers are now used to have a lot of devices at home, and in Spain, we have bigger families probably than in the rest of Europe. I mean, this is a very demanded service. So that's probably our star service.
Dana, this is interesting, isn't it? People, well, the hardware is changing. People want to be able to access broadband across all their devices, to sync all of their devices. How does a cable operator provide that?
Well, I think it's not as hard as it sounds, which is good. I think that the trick that we have to... So the first part is we have made the investment. So the same pipe, you use the same pipe across all of the devices. And if you're putting 50 megs as your standard speed, that's our entry speed in Ireland. So you can well and truly hang 10 devices off of that and have a great quality of service. The hard bit is understanding where our responsibility for supporting the customer begins and ends, because now you're evolving into a territory where instead of it being a pipe to a TV and a box that just frankly works every day, multiple devices are complex. Sometimes the Wi-Fi tunes out, sometimes the device isn't syncing properly, and instead of being responsible for the set-top box that you provided into the home, you're now responsible for the customer's entire IT ecosystem in their household, if you're not careful in regards to where to draw the boundaries. And this is a very new part of the evolution in the cable industry, and I'm sure one that we're all trying to figure out exactly where is the right place to begin and end the degree of customer support and what's considered premium and what's considered jacks for openers. And I think that's a great opportunity, frankly, for us as an industry to really develop an emotional connection with the customers. I mean, we found that broadband, we just did a survey, broadband was rated more important than water and electricity in Irish households. Seriously. Now, obviously, you can't have broadband without the electricity, but people do have an emotional connection to their broadband, and we're in the primary seat of capitalizing on that emotional connection. I think it's a great opportunity for the industry.
That's very, very interesting, because what we've entered here is the territory of where suddenly broadband, it is a utility, but it offers so much more than a utility, isn't it? And I see you nodding. Miranda, give us your point of view on that.
Well, it's what I was, rather what I was saying earlier on. That, the broadband is the shorthand now for the delivery of all content and communication services to the individual consumer and indeed and the household in the home and outside the home. This is where it all starts to get so intricate, and that does require a supplier, from the cable operator's point of view, a perspective which is agile, responsive, consumer-centric, extremely disciplined, technologically savvy. It has a significant implication for the skill sets that are required, and it's something that we at Liberty Global are looking at very actively in terms of now driving a company-wide program which we call the People Agenda, to really continue to develop the skills and opportunities available to our staff. I was in Denver last week for a board meeting, and we timed it to coincide with our Emerging Leaders program, in which young people from across younger managers from across the company come in to participate in business challenges and are allocated to individual mentors from the very senior management team and indeed the board. And that's certainly a program we're looking forward to extend to the Virgin Media team, because we obviously want to make sure that we can bring them in to participate in that program. these are very, very challenging business issues, and ones, we can't afford to sit back and get complacent for 1 minute about the nature of the products and services we're offering and how we need to be structured.
Well, this is something I wanted to address also from a human resources perspective, getting the skill set right and recognizing how the customer is viewing you in a completely different manner. And Berit, presumably at Telenor, Norway, you have that in the forefront of your mind when you're allocating costs to who you're going to be hiring, etc.
Yeah. I think it's going to be more and more important, and as some of the other ladies have talked about, customer centricity is going to be everything going forward. I think we have to listen to the customers. They need to decide what content to watch, when to watch it, and where, on multi-room solutions on different devices. If you look at my children when we are driving up in the mountains, they are sitting in a back seat with their pads, and they are watching video from Oslo high up in the mountains, and they require high-capacity mobile broadband, and they require good content, and they are just using it. They are born native digital. So I think the customer demand is there. We have to be there with the customer, and I think as a company, you need to take the customer requirement into consideration and actually think about how should we be there in the middle of the development, because the telco industry, the cable TV industry, is one of the most dynamic industries in the world, and you just keep up with the changes. You need to constantly think about how to develop the competence within the company. So this is a challenge going forward.
Annet?
I think the big challenge is cable is now in a very good position, and I think it will stay there a couple of years, and then all kind of other parties will start building glass fiber and will catch up. So we have a few years to make our marks, and I think it's very important in those years to really focus. So there's so many good and interesting things we could do on the content side, on the services side, but I think the point Dana just made, and it's really about creating this ecosystem for the customer at home and make it really, really easy to use. And that in itself is already an enormous challenge, will require a lot of skill building in the company. And so I would make really sure that now in the few years we are ahead, so to say, let's really pick our battles and really make focus that we're very, very good at it. And don't try to be all over the place, because you will never be able to build all those skills.
Well, speaking of people who are logged on and online, obviously this forum's on Twitter, so we're going to be getting some questions that are going to be coming through, obviously, online. Babati, do we have any questions at the moment?
Don't forget, of course, questions at cablecongress.com, please. We've got a couple. The first one is a general question to all the panellists. How do you see the competition between traditional telcos and cable companies play out in the next 3 to 5 years as the players step into each other's shoes? That's a question from Sudipta Panda from techmahindra.com. Sudipta, thank you very much for that. And ladies?
Yeah, should we start with Miranda there?
Sure. Clearly, the competition becomes very intense. The telcos are going to get better at packaging and marketing content. They're going to be more savvy. They are preparing to make significant investments, in some cases supported by national subsidy, which is an issue for us. And I think from the cable industry's point of view, we just have to stay ahead of the game. And it comes back to every dimension that I talked about earlier. And we are in this fascinating world where the more complex the challenges we have to deal with, the more we have to focus on the simplicity of the offering to the consumer. We have to make it absolutely dead easy to use, attractive, and we have to drive consumer purchasing behavior in a way that's absolutely intuitive. And that means investing in the best possible technology, the best user interfaces, and the best customer service. And that's our only competitive advantage.
Berit, how do you see the competition playing out? You obviously got a unique perspective here.
Yes, I think, as Annet is saying, I think the cable TV operators in general have a 3, 4, 5 years advantage to an old incumbent that has not been able to turn around offering fiber and TV to the customers. So In that respect, I think the cable TV operators are really good. But if you look at Norway, the utility companies has actually rolled out fiber to 20–25% of the households in Norway in a very, very good way with very, very good TV offerings on top, interactive type of services. And they are really, you know, competing with the cable TV operators as well. And I think, you know, if they go into an area and roll out fiber, there is a problem for a cable TV operator to actually compete because they have both the service perspective and they have fiber connections. And in Norway, people are concerned about services, but also about technology. So they win if they start to compete with the cable TV operators. But compared to a telco that has not turned around, the cable TV is much better.
Annet, what do you make? Fiber the future, is that where we're going to be? 3 to 5? Fiber the future, 3 to 5 years from now?
Actually, when I was sitting at the opening speech of Manuel, I was wondering, you know, how long will we still have a Cable Europe Congress? Yeah, and it will, you know, in some years' time, it will be like, you know, platform operator congress, and both the infrastructures will converge, and we'll just have a couple of players, probably quite large, across, you know, with skill, competing and trying to have this, and how that will play out will depend greatly how regulators will react. That will depend greatly on, but that's how the world will look like in not too long. Yes. So it will converge, and it just will be platform operators competing against each other, and hopefully not too destructive way.
Do you agree?
Yes, yes. I think that one of the things that are already starting to change, until very recently, we thought about mobile operators and fixed operators and cable operators and fiber operators. I think this technology, these platform concepts are going to fade away. I think that we will have telecommunication operators, and some operators will be specialized more in some type of products, some type of services. But I think that we will have all to learn on how to deliver all the services, bundle services. And this question about being a mobile infrastructure or fixed infrastructure, I think is going to disappear, because I think customers at the end don't really care. Okay, they don't really care if this is mobile or fixed. They just want to have the services. And yes, quality will always be a priority. And I think that the best operator will be one that is able to give the best quality products, innovative products, and look after customers.
I just want to get a little twist on that question and to ask you, Dana. So competition, where will this lead us? Because we've got this sort of glut of services, glut of content. Will we end up with a narrowing of competition, an expansion of competition? Presumably the situation will stay fluid in 3 to 5 years?
I think it'll be very fluid. I think it is inevitable that the current relationship that exists with the mobile industry is an example, which is more of a wholesale supplier kind of relationship. I think it's inevitable that partnership deepens, whether it's a consolidation or whether it's a greater strategic alignment, because customers want to be untethered. They, as Rosalia was saying, they don't care which device and in which location. So that, I think, is going to force our view of the industry to evolve and to change. I think that the content side, the challenge of them going directly to the customer and starting to form their own ecosystem separate from the cable industry, I guess you would say, is one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face in the next 3 to 5 years, and making sure that we are still relevant, we're still able to monetize our asset, being the network, appropriately, and that we can consolidate that in a simple way to the customer. That's going to be a very tricky evolution.
Interesting stuff. Babette, any more questions?
More questions. Collis Overcott asks, CEO of Visiware, by the way, asks, Rosalia in particular mentioned being close to customers on all screens. How does social interactive second screen come into play for cable operators? That's a question for you. And Yvonne Shares asks, how can cable play a role in the overall aging of population and the pressure this puts on the health sector?
Okay, well, I think that getting closer to the customer needs a culture, a company's culture that puts a high priority on that and rewards that. Okay, so I think that, for instance, in ONO, I think we've changed, we have advanced a lot on this. I think that having people that develops easy services and cares for customers and develops a customer care model that is efficient, because it has to be not only very good, but it has to be efficient. Customers are not ready to pay fortunes for customer service. So, for instance, we found in ONO that trying to deliver a lot of the service and a lot of the sales through internet, through online, is for us a very powerful tool, because most of our customers are heavy users of internet. Therefore, if you give them a high-quality service online, they will be very happy to use it. So we have put in a lot of efforts to develop a very high-quality level of e-care and e-sales. Okay? So I think that this requires a clear focus in the company towards delivering and being close to the customer. And for instance, I think cable companies have a big advantage on that versus the previous old incumbents, because they didn't have that. And building this culture of being concerned about what the customers think and being close to the customers is one advantage we have. Okay, so I think that will be key for the future.
And Babita, we had a different question, which was surrounding...
Just a reminder, Yvonne Scher's asking, how can cable play a role in the overall ageing of the population and the pressure this puts on the health sector? And that's to all of you.
That's for everybody.
Okay, yes, let's ask Miranda to answer that one.
I mean, if I may, I'll set it in a slightly broader context, which is that, I think that, our focus so far in the development of the industry has been very much on the delivery of services to residential consumers, and we've talked about that complexity. Clearly, as broadband is rolled out to a much higher percentage of homes, a much broader range of consumer, including older consumer, will start to take up services. And I think one of the things we're very excited about in terms of our acquisition of Virgin Media is that we think that we have some tremendous lessons to learn about the work that they've done in rolling out B2B services and have engaged in, starting to engage in the delivery of public service. And that's something that, Lutz in Germany or Diederik looking at other European markets, I think, will be very interested to learn about. So that, again, cable broadband starts to become, I hesitate to use the word utility, perhaps ubiquitous is a better expression. An absolutely essential service and distribution network that will provide all forms of practical and entertainment services and communications to all consumers, be they at home or at work.
And part of that question was also directed at providing services to people at different ends of the age spectrum. And Berit, this is one of the interesting things that presumably you have to look for and plan for, because a lot of the people using broadband technology these days are young people, but there are a lot of people at the other end of the age spectrum who also need education, they need customer support to provide, to use the services that you provide.
Grandchildren.
On the broadband side,
on the broadband side.
I would just go back to the question about e-health, because what we have done in Norway, what we have piloted, is actually live longer at home. It's not for the young people, it's actually for the elderly people. Yeah. So they can stay at home with some sensors at home that are actually able to send signals into the community center, so they can send out nurses if they are really required, not just checking if things are going on. And we have tried that out in several communities in Norway, and people are saying that they feel safe when they have those type of technology at home, and that they would like to stay home for a longer time. So this is actually increasing the quality of life for elderly people, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. I think the problem here is that you actually need system integrators to do this in a very cost-efficient way. All the technology is actually around. You don't need a broadband connection, you need only connection, because it's small amount of data. But it has to be coupled up with the community centers, the nurses that are coming, and also to relatives, because they can also get messages if things aren't as they should at home for elderly people. So it's more about taking that into use, have system integrators. So I think, you know, if there are something the government should be focused on going further, is actually to have that type of technology at home for elderly people.
Absolutely, but even from a broader, because obviously these are separate issues, but even from a broader perspective, if you're running a company that also offers broadband, you have to offer services and customer support to people with different requirements as well. A lot of people might be tempted to think that obviously internet users are mostly young, but that's not necessarily the case, is it, Annet?
No, by now, if you look at the demographics, especially in Northern Europe, it's completely parallel to the age distribution. So it's not true anymore that internet users are young. But as things are getting more sophisticated, people do need help. But it's not just the elderly, it's maybe also the less educated people. So this whole way of making it easy, accessible, and to use, talking, it's very, what does customer centricity mean? It's very easy to say it, but what does it really mean? And it's a lot about making it very intuitive, very, with good support when needed, and those are the big challenges.
Integration sounds like it's key. Should we take some questions from the floor, or no, let me just come back to actually this point about a provider having to sort of second guess what the customer might want, and this is where I come to you, Dana. Presumably, if you're at the helm of one of these companies, a cable company, you do have to be very much on top of the trends, as I was saying before, at both ends of the age spectrum. And you, in fact, addressed this initially by saying people look at us differently. They're starting to expect completely different services from a cable provider, not necessarily television. They want help with their mobile phone line, they want help with their broadband, etc.
So that's absolutely true. And I think there's probably a couple themes that I would point to there. One is, as we are more and more facing quite significant global brands. So in our market, we're a very small market of 4.5 million people, 1.65 million households. So Ireland's relatively tiny. But you have Sky, satellite service in there. You have 4 mobile operators. You have Vodafone, O2, Aircom, and 3, all into one market of just 4 million people. And then, of course, you have the local incumbent, ourselves, and the utility operator, the power company that's planning on building fiber to homes for a part of Ireland as well. So when you're dealing with your very small, isolated country, so to speak, with those kind of behemoths of brand names, it's very good in that situation to be part of the Liberty Global family, as an example, part of a larger entity. So in order to keep pace with the different evolution of consumer needs, you've got a great corporate parent that can help the R&D funding, so to speak, of keeping up with somebody like a Sky or a Vodafone as their evolution. What's really within within our control quite directly is not just taking those wonderful products kind of off the shelf, but then creating that unique customer experience within the country and changing that. What we're going through is an evolution of skill sets at the very across the entirety of the organization. So the individuals that are in the trucks are going to have to change how we train them and how much they have to understand about computers and IT as opposed to just running a cable to the box. The individual in the call center, it's no longer about sending us an update to their conditional access entitlements. It's about troubleshooting multiple different forms of TVs, computers, and access systems into that. So it's a very different type of employee and skill set. And that's what's good about the cable industry is because we're largely through the deployment of network, we have the capacity to focus on this issue and get it right.
Rosalia, cable obviously does what it says on the tin, but cable is also becoming mobile, isn't it?
Yes.
How does that play into your strategy?
Well, I think we are just starting to discover that different world because we are very new in mobile. But obviously, we have a lot of capacities and we have a lot of the basic tools and knowledge are the same for a fixed product or a mobile. Spain is evolving very fast into mobile, especially data. We are the country, despite all the economic problems, we are the country in Europe with the highest iPhones and smartphones penetration is very high. Data is growing very, very fast in mobile. So we are also growing very fast. We started launching convergent products only 8 months ago, and we now sell more than 15% of our customer base already has a mobile. So we are discovering that customers just want, if they find a very basic, satisfactory bundle that combines everything, that's what they want, because it makes life simpler, because usually if you buy more services, you get an advantageous price in total, so that's good. And if you trust the company for fixed and broadband, you will trust this company also for mobile. So I think that we have to learn very fast, and I think we are now delivering a service that is quite satisfactory. And I think that the real challenge for the future is about delivering this service. I mean, the infrastructure, the networks needed to deliver all this represents a challenge, because a dual network is a very complicated, CapEx-intensive solution. So, but I'm sure we'll find some solutions for the near future.
And on that positive note, I'm afraid to say we've run out of time, but I think we've all learned that obviously, as many of you in this room know, working in this industry, we're all painfully aware of the fact that this is obviously an evolving landscape from a competition point of view, from a regulatory point of view, from an economic point of view, and also from a customer value chain point of view as well. Thank you very much for joining us here, and also thank you very much to my panel of eminent guests for their interesting and sometimes differing points of views. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.